You're watching Twin Tiers Sunday with Renata Stiehl.
Hello and welcome to Twin Tiers Sunday. I'm Renata Stiehl with WENY News, and I'm joined here this week by Peter Wallin and Shelly Cadek of Wallin Insurance. In the Twin Tiers, we are talking about flood insurance because, well, we've seen over the past couple of years, we've had the 2011 flood hit the area from Tropical Storm Lee, and most recently some flash flooding that's hit the area. So it's something that's been on a lot of people's minds, and perhaps something that, whether you are an existing homeowner or you're going to be a new homeowner and you're looking at your insurance option, flood insurance is certainly something that you should be, educated about. And I'm going to get a little bit of education today too, so I want to thank the both of you for coming on the show. But
great.
Sure. Peter, I want to start with you because a lot of people aren't sure, other than if they know that when they buy a home or they're in a known flood zone and they have to get flood insurance, what people, other than those known people,
Sure.
Who needs flood insurance?
Actually, anybody can buy flood insurance if they really have an interest and a desire, because we have seen, like you said, we have seen more and more of these episodes here in the last few years. So anybody can buy flood insurance in the area, but there are certain designated flood areas and zones, and they have what they call flood maps that determine where the house is located, and that helps determine whether you're in this flood zone area, which would require you to have flood insurance versus in an area that would not require you to have it. So there's quite a bit of areas on both sides here in our area.
And now, as we've seen with, I guess most recently back in August, we saw some flash flooding happen in the Catherine Creek area, also over in the Beaver Dams area, where traditionally you don't see a lot of flooding. I don't think anybody anticipated that they would wake up that morning and have a creek running through their front yard. And now they're dealing with some of the aftermath of that as they deal with their insurance. And you said it doesn't matter if you that you can purchase supplemental flood insurance even if you don't live in a flood zone.
Yeah, and let's make this clear from the start. There's homeowners insurance and there's flood insurance.
Right, I want to get into that because your homeowner's insurance isn't going to cover flood damage.
Correct.
So let's talk about, what does flood insurance cover that your traditional homeowner's policy would not cover?
Flood insurance covers flood, and it is a national program run and sponsored by the government. So the government runs this program, and they started doing that in 1968. So the United States government, it's called National Flood Insurance Program. So no matter where you go to buy the flood insurance itself, it's the same price. So all these insurance companies that we deal with across the country all can sell flood insurance, but it's all kind of regulated through the government through this National Flood Insurance Program. So anybody can buy flood insurance, and if it's in this flood zone, you're required to buy the flood insurance, but it's all administered by the government. Separate from a homeowner's insurance company that insures, fire insurance and wind and lightning and that kind of thing. So.
And now it's important to know, I guess, for a homeowner's policy that covers your structure, correct? And not necessarily your belongings inside the home. And I think a lot of people don't realize that as well. So Shelly, when people are coming to an insurance agent, whether it's Wallin Insurance or another insurance company, of course it's important to make sure that they know that.
That's correct. If you purchase a flood insurance policy, most of the time you're only covering the dwelling. You can purchase insurance for the contents, and it can be added on there, but 9 times out of 10 people only have it to cover the dwelling. And then they realize in the event of a flood, all of a sudden there's no coverage for the contents.
Right, and then people are, maybe their home is able to be salvaged, but they're out their furniture, all their valuables, their belongings, their electronics, appliances, things like that. And so as I've been a homeowner for a couple of years now, and I have to admit that I haven't done this, but I know it's really good advice, is one, to make sure that you have the insurance that'll cover your contents, but two, to document the things that you own. Either by taking pictures and keeping them in a secure place, keeping track of receipts and dollar amounts for things. That is that correct?
Yeah, and again, we're talking about a homeowner's policy versus a flood insurance policy. On the homeowner's policy, that's a pretty, what they call an all-risk type policy. So that's going to pay for any sort of peril, lightning, fire, wind, theft, anything that could go wrong. A lot of water damage if the roof leaks, that kind of thing from ice. So yeah, you've got insurance that would cover the structure on a home, And then yes, you can also buy contents insurance, and most of that's included in your homeowner's insurance policy.
Okay.
And to get to your point, yeah, you can either make a list of all your items, which many of us talk about doing, but not many of us actually do it. Or in these days and age, go around with your cell phone and take pictures. You know, either take a video of each room in the house or take pictures on your iPhone or a camera. Because if there is a problem and a fire or something, you know, it's so easy to then go back and look at pictures and see this is what we had in these rooms. And again, to prove to us, the insurance company, what you really had.
Right. And now as far as flood insurance is concerned, we mentioned that if you have flood insurance, it would cover the dwelling, but what does not constitute flood insurance? I guess if we're talking if you know, there's a water main break in your neighborhood, and as a consequence, something happens, your basement gets flooded.
Okay.
Is that something that, say, if you have flood insurance, would that take care of it, or would that fall under your homeowner's policy?
If it is water coming into your home from outside, seeping in or coming in, groundwater coming in from outside the house, that is flood. So that's going to be flood insurance. If it's a pipe breaking in your house and that's coming in, that's your homeowner's, because that's inside the house.
I see.
The one exception where can be a little gray area is water and sewage backup. And that sometimes can fall in there and help you out, but that has to be endorsed on your homeowner's policy. So you want to ask your homeowner's insurance company, do I have this coverage on my policy?
Okay.
Otherwise, if it is groundwater coming in from outside, that's flood. And that's always going to fall under your flood insurance.
And now, is there an instance where, say, as a homeowner, I would go to an insurance agency and say, I'd like to purchase flood insurance, but they would say, oh, well, you know, you live here, therefore you don't need it, or it's not necessary. I mean, ultimately, I guess the homeowner makes the right decision, but they are relying on the guidance of an agent to make that decision.
We'd be happy to sell a flood insurance policy to anybody in this area. And anybody can buy flood insurance. And we've actually gotten calls since last year for people that don't live in a flood zone, but they're worried. They're worried about what we've seen in our area in the last 2 or 3 years. So they can purchase flood insurance. And it's not that expensive, because traditionally and historically they haven't seen floods in that area. To get back to your point again, is if someone's buying a house or looking to purchase a house through a realtor, one of the first things they should be doing is looking at the area where they're looking to buy a house to see if that structure itself is located in a designated flood zone area, because that could require them to buy flood insurance, force them to have to buy flood insurance.
Right.
And if it's not in an area that it is required, the price is so much better for you to go ahead and get it in a preferred zone, and then you have it. So if something happens, you're getting it for a much lower price, and then it not only covers the dwelling, but it will also cover the contents.
I see.
So if you're not required to get it, yes, you can still get it, and you should.
Gives you that peace of mind.
Absolutely. And because we're hearing that from some of the people, say, in Pine Valley specifically, that were affected by the flash flooding in Catherine Creek, they're saying, well, they told me I didn't need flood insurance, and therefore I didn't have it, and now these people are dealing with loss of their belongings.
And that was a flood. That was considered a flood, a flash flood in that area. Even though it was in a small area and it happened real fast, that was considered a flood. So homeowners insurance didn't pay for a lot of that.
And so one thing that we want to talk about coming up in our next segment, and Peter, you and I have discussed this, there are some significant changes coming to flood insurance programs and the ways that that's administered. So we want to talk about that in our next segment, so please stay with us for Twin Tiers Sunday.
Twin Tiers Sunday will return in a moment.
And welcome back to Twin Tiers Sunday. I'm talking with Peter Wallin and Shelly Cadek from Peter Wallin Insurance. And we were talking about flood insurance, and we touched briefly in the last segment about what flood insurance covers, what it doesn't cover, the difference between being required to have flood insurance versus having that be an option that you can purchase separately for your policy if you live outside a flood zone. And now, Peter, we were just talking about how flood insurance has really changed over the past not quite 10 years. You said since Katrina, because I think for for the insurance industry, Katrina changed everything.
Yeah, the actual flood program has been in existence for about 45 years now, and it's worked very, very well, to be honest with you. And basically, it's insurance in general. So people pay money towards this flood program, and then the money gets put into a pool, and then they use that money to pay the claims. And for the first 35 years, that worked pretty well. It worked pretty well all the way up until the early 2000s, and then Hurricane Katrina came, and it was just devastating, as we all know. And billions and billions of dollars were spent on southern Louisiana and Hurricane Katrina, and the government and this federal program has not recovered from that. So right now they're $18 billion in debt with the flood program. So there's not money there for flood insurance to be paid out as we move into the future. So we're seeing rate increases, we're seeing deficits here, we're seeing problems. So it's gotten worse and worse and worse since the last 10 years with Katrina. And now we're seeing more and more of these disasters. So it just seems to be becoming very common that we're seeing these disasters quite regularly. So there's where we're kind of experiencing problems, and then some changes that are coming right soon.
And now, of course, with Superstorm Sandy, we're coming up on the 1-year anniversary of that, and there are people who still haven't had their claims answered in New York and New Jersey. And as you said, as far as the government is concerned, the money is just not there. Even though there's money being put in, it's not enough. And so I guess it's going to be, this is going to be an ongoing problem, as statistically we're just seeing more natural disasters like hurricanes.
You really are, and it's no one's fault. It's just it's nature. It's acts of nature, and so FEMA tries to step in and help out, and FEMA has offered low interest loans to families in Binghamton and Owego and Athens, Pennsylvania. Low interest loans for people that don't have or never had flood insurance. But a loan is a loan. You've got to pay that back. Now the federal insurance program comes in and says, okay, if you have insurance, we'll pay for that. That's why we're trying to encourage people to be aware and to start paying attention to your areas and your neighborhoods, and especially when people are getting ready to sell their house, or someone's out there looking to buy a house, because they might not realize where their house is located and what might be looked at here in the future.
And that brings up the issue of what's being called an elevation certificate. And Shelly, what exactly is that?
An elevation certificate is where a surveyor goes out to your land. They figure out, based on the flood level, where your house sits in regards to if there is a flood, where the water will come in, whether you are 2 or 3 feet above flood level or 2 or 3 feet below. And your rates depend on where you fall in that zone. So that's what that is. It's a survey of your land.
Okay, and now does this affect certain people, like is this something that's in effect now or is going into
It's in effect already for certain homes, but what is happening is they are now saying that we have to have an elevation certificate for every flood policy that we sell. Before we didn't have to, and it was only certain homes. Now we're going to have that elevation certificate for every home. When you come into our office and say, I need to get a quote on flood insurance because it is required for my loan closing, then yes, we're going to need that elevation certificate. We could do it without it for the first year, but your rates will be most likely higher than what they would be if you went ahead and did it. And when that year is up, your policy will not renew without it. So it's pretty much, you have to have it.
And so you're seeing, as an insurance company, you're seeing that, say, new home purchases and the banks are working with the lender or with the home buyers, and you really can't close on a home unless you've got home insurance on it. So really this is not just affecting the home buyer, this is affecting the lenders, it's affecting insurance agencies.
That's right. So it's an awareness thing, and we want everybody to know that, and it's actually October 1st of this year, this is when this new rule takes place, that everybody that's buying a home moving forward should look immediately. Don't wait until the last minute. Don't wait until you're getting ready to close on the house payment. Everybody should look to see if the house is located in a flood zone, and if it is, Shelly's right, they're required to go out and hire a land surveyor to actually go out and investigate and then create this elevation certificate, which will determine the price of insurance. And this is going to cost money too. So it's
it will cost money, and typically you're looking at 2 to 3 weeks.
So if you do not want to put it off to the last second.
Exactly. If you're close to closing and find out you need this, you're looking at a few weeks before a surveyor can get out to your land, get the survey done, process the paperwork, and produce this elevation certificate.
And we know as a homeowner, you don't want anything to delay that closing if at all possible. And so this is something, going forward, people need to know about.
So here's another thought. Let's say mom and dad own the house, and they've owned the same house for 30 years, and they may be in a flood zone or they may not be, but the house is paid off, they don't have a mortgage. Now they're looking to sell their house. And this is the first time in these 20 or 30 years that they're putting the house on the market. For that house transaction to go through, and if they're in a flood zone, and there's a lot of flood zones in our area, in Chemung County, Steuben County, if they're in that zone, it's going to be required to have this elevation certificate. And so you go out and hire the land surveyor, and that might run $400 to $500. And then, as Shelly says, it might take 2 to 3 weeks to get that certificate completed and formed back. And then we'll find out what the price of the flood insurance is for the new person that's going to buy that house. So it's just going to take some time, and we'll work with people on that. But it's just going to take some time and make sure everybody understands how this process works.
Yes, and it's going to take some time. It's kind of a trickle effect as it, moves through the system. Okay, well, we want to continue talking about flood insurance in our final segment of Twin Tier Sunday, so please stay with us.
Twin Tier Sunday will return in a moment.
And welcome back. I'm talking with Peter and Shelly. We've been talking about flood insurance, and now maybe you've owned your home for a long time, or you are in the beginning process of looking at buying a new home. If you're like me, I love to browse real estate just because I find that interesting, and I like looking at homes. But you're wondering, there's never been a flood here where I live, but do I live in an area that could potentially flood someday? Or maybe I'm looking to buy this house and I'd like to know before I get pre-approved for a mortgage if that area is in a flood zone. And there's Shelly and Peter, there are ways that you can look up if your property is potentially in an area that could be threatened by flood.
Yeah, there is a website you can go online called floodsmart.gov, and it'll have you put in your address. It's very simple. All you do is type in your address, and it'll tell you if I'm in a high risk or a low risk. It doesn't give you specific details, but it will give you at least a general idea.
Right.
The other way you can find out is call one of us, and we can look up your address, see what, whether or not it is in a flood zone where it's going to require it. Or you can talk to the bank where you're getting your mortgage, and they should be able to tell you, because they're always going to pull that.
Right, of course, and it's always, if you are going to carry a mortgage on your home, it's in the bank's interest to know that their, investment is protected in the event, and yours as well. And as we said at the beginning of the show, Peter, even if you are not required to purchase flood insurance, you can still purchase flood insurance for that peace of mind.
That's right, and it's amazing to think that in New York State, out of all the 50 states in the country, New York State is ranked number 4 in the country as far as natural disasters. And we don't think that. We might not realize that. We always think, we see the TV and we see the storms in Texas or Florida or California, but New York is ranked number 4 annually for the number of disasters: ice, wind, flood, hurricane, whatever, tornado in Elmira. That's never going to happen. It happens. So a lot of it is just paying attention here in our own neighborhood to what type of insurance we have, and perhaps what type of insurance we need. So homeowners insurance is great, flood insurance is great.
Right, and I think for some of the people that live in Owego and Athens, I know Athens and Owego, they both saw some flooding in 2006, but I don't think anybody thought that we would ever see again what we saw in 2011, that for a lot of people brought back a lot of memories, and not good ones, from '72. A lot of people didn't have flood insurance because the levee system was in place, and we saw in Athens the water did end up it was higher than in 72 and went over the levees.
Right.
And they, you know, so they weren't protected.
And you know what we see? We also see many, many people remodeling their basements. So everybody
Yes.
tends to
Right.
fix up their basement, whether they put a game room down there, a theater room, a bar, or a kid's room. So everybody tends to want to, you know, remodel their house and use the basement as another living quarters. But what happens? That means we're bringing expensive, valuable
Right.
things down into
Yes.
the basement, and that's where the floodwater is
And
coming
that's
first.
where it
So-
is, exactly. And most of the time, your contents in your basement is not covered.
Okay, that's a good thing to know because we are seeing, as you said, more people turning those basements into dens or
That's right.
rec rooms and not strictly for, my house was built in 1890, so there's no rehabilitation for the basement. It's cold and it's
Right.
damp and it's just where the
right.
water heater and the boiler and all that stuff is. And but yeah, that is a good
Yes.
point to bring
And,
up for
and I
people.
believe as far as the flood insurance, as far as the policy on the building, a flood insurance policy, the furnace and the hot water heater, that's considered part of the building
Yes.
in the basement.
Those are covered in the basement. The washer and dryer is covered in the basement, the deep freezer, but it's very, very limited.
But not any of your couches or furniture or
None
kids'
of that
games
is
or anything
covered.
like that.
And now another thing that we mentioned in between the break for people who maybe should have supplemental on their homeowner's policy is coverage in the event of, say, a sewer backup. If you
Yes.
have a sump pump that fails or you have some sort of, you know, you don't have, say, a backflow preventer
Right.
in your home and you find your basement either filled with water or, you know, heaven forbid, some raw sewage.
sewage.
It's really worst case
Exactly.
scenario here.
Yes, it is an endorsement that you can have put on your homeowner's policy that covers sewer and drain backup, and it's very inexpensive, especially whenever you look at the amount of damage it can cause. It is very inexpensive, and we highly recommend everyone do that.
Yeah,
Have that
I would
coverage.
echo that as well. If there's one thing that I say as I'm out there talking to as many people as possible is look at your own home insurance policy. Just look at it, make sure you understand it, and especially look for that water and sewer drain backup coverage. It might run $20 or $30 a year on your
Right.
policy, so it's no big deal.
Yeah.
But that will cover the toilet that backs up, the pipes that
Right.
back up, anything, a drain in the basement. If there's a drain in your basement and it tends to back up, there's insurance that would help pay for that. So drains, gutters sometimes that overflow, that could be considered overflow of water and sewer and drain
Right.
backup type of coverage. So the insurance companies are not looking to deny claims. They really are looking to pay claims. Believe me when I say that. They are looking to pay the claims if you have that coverage on your policy.
Right,
So-
and the important thing is that you need to understand your policy. And so after
right.
talking with you, I'm going to go home, I'm
There
going to
you
look
go.
over my
Thank
policy.
you.
And of course, you know, if you have any questions or just something doesn't, I know sometimes the line item things can kind of be hard to decipher. Well, what
Yes.
does that mean? You're always encouraged to call your
right.
agent.
Call your agent, ask the questions, come to us, we'll review it and see what we can do and maybe work something out for you too.
Sure.
So,
All right,
yep.
so Peter, I'm going to let you do a little shameless plug. If people want to contact Wallin
Thank
Insurance,
you.
how do they do that?
Thank you. Appreciate it very much. It's been great to be on TV here with you. WallinInsurance.com. We appreciate it very much, and we're right on College Avenue in Elmira, and been there for 16 years and looking for another 16 years. So it's great to be here.
Great. Well, Peter and
Exactly.
Shelly, thank you so much for coming on the show, and thank you for joining us for Twin Tier Sunday. We hope you learned a little bit about flood insurance and your homeowner's policy as well. Thanks for joining us, and we hope you have a wonderful Sunday.